Memphis. Summer of night. The porch light flickers on. A woman in her 70s opens the door, squinting into the night. On her front step, black Cadillac still rumbling, stands a man in a crisp white suit. She blinks, thinking it's a dream. But it isn't. Elvis Presley is standing on her porch. Before we get to the moment that left her speechless, make sure you stick around until the end, because what Elvis left behind that night is something her family still treasures to this day. The heat still clung to the streets of Memphis, long after the sun had dropped. Porch fans whirred lazily. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked at nothing. On a quiet street lined with pecan trees, a woman in a faded floral dress turned the page of her book. Miss Clara sat on her porch swing, the wicker groaning softly under her weight. The cicadas were so loud, they almost drowned out the radio on the window ledge. If I Can Dream playing low through a bit of static. The sweet smell of honeysuckle drifted in from the fence line. She rocked gently, bare feet brushing the painted wood floorboard. Inside, the living room clock ticked toward 9. Clara's life at 74 was quiet now. Afternoons tending roses, evenings with novels and the radio. She had once stood at the front of a classroom for 40 years, chalk dust on her hands, corralling restless teenagers. She never boasted, but one of those boys had a name the whole world would come to know: Elvis Aaron Presley. 10th grade, a lanky kid in the back row, who tapped pencils in rhythm when he thought she wasn't looking. He'd hum when the class was working. Not much more than a rumor among neighbors now. But she knew, and though she didn't know it yet, that old connection was about to bring a knock on her door that would stop her heart in the best way. That same evening, across town, the rehearsal hall at Graceland echoed with guitar licks and laughter. Elvis was running through the Vegas setlist. White jumpsuit unzipped halfway, scarf looped loose around his neck. Someone in the band mentioned a name in passing: Miss Clara Jenkins. Witnesses later said his face changed. He set his guitar down without a word. "Where's she living now?" he asked his driver. Minutes later, the big black Cadillac eased out of the driveway, its headlights cutting a quiet path through Memphis streets. No press, no fanfare, not even his full entourage. Just one bodyguard in the front seat and Elvis in the back, looking out the window like he was headed somewhere important. Street lamps flickered past, the low hum of the engine mixed with the faint creak of leather seats. Elvis adjusted the scarf at his collar and leaned forward, reading the street signs. When they turned onto Clara's block, he told the driver, "Slow down." Behind a lace curtain 2 houses down, a neighbor spotted the Cadillac, her eyes going wide. She whispered to her husband in the kitchen, "That's him." The car rolled to a stop in front of Clara's small white house. The engine idled. A porch light flickered once, then glowed steady. Elvis reached for the door handle. The headlights washed the small porch in warm gold. The hum of the Cadillac filled the otherwise still night. A figure stepped out, white suit catching the porch light, silk scarf falling in a perfect drape. The gravel crunched under his polished boots as he closed the car door. A faint breeze carried the scent of magnolia blossoms from Clara's side yard. The bodyguard stayed at the curb, hands clasped in front, watching the shadows. Elvis took the steps slowly, one hand brushing the wooden railing like he was feeling every grain of it. At the top he knocked one, not loud, not soft, just enough that it would carry inside. In the front room, Clara froze. The knock didn't match the usual neighborly rhythm. She set her book down and walked to the door, each step on the hardwood clicking like the ticking clock on the mantel. Through the screen, she saw the outline: broad shoulders, dark hair, catching a halo of porch light. She knew that silhouette. Her breath caught, memories flooding back, tapping pencils on a desk, a shy grin when she caught him humming. Her fingers gripped the cool brass knob. She pushed the door open, the hinges letting out a soft creak. For a moment, neither spoke. The night air pressed in around them. Then Elvis smiled, eyes crinkling at the edges. "Evening, ma'am," he said softly, almost like he wasn't sure if she'd remember him. "I think I owe you a visit." Clara's hand trembled on the doorframe. "Lord above, Elvis Presley." He gave a small nod, his voice dropping to something more personal. Just Elvis tonight. They stood there, the past and present colliding in a silence so thick you could almost hear the cicadas pause. A moth darted near the porch light. Somewhere behind them, a screen door slammed shut. Someone across the street stepping out to get a better look. Elvis shifted slightly, as if remembering why he was there. His right hand slid into the pocket of his suit pants. His fingers closed around something. "I've been holding on to this for a while," he said. "Thought maybe you should have it back." He kept his hand closed, the small object hidden. Clara's eyes followed it like she was trying to guess what it could. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, but he didn't open his palm. The magnolia scent drifted heavier now. As the breeze shifted, the bodyguard adjusted his stance at the curb. Clara glanced toward the car, then back to Elvis. "What is it?" He didn't answer, just gave the smallest shake of his head, as if to say not yet. The moment hung there between them. Elvis's hand still closed, Clara's breath shallow. Whatever was in his palm, it was something she hadn't seen in decades, and something she'd never forgot. Elvis slowly opened his hand. Resting in his palm was an old black fountain pen, the gold trim worn thin, the nib slightly bent. It caught the porch light for a second before she gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. The faint smell of old ink, imagined or real, seemed to hang in the warm night air. "You lent me this," Elvis said, voice low. "Back in 10th grade. Told me to use it for something good." Clara shook her head in disbelief, laughing through it. "I never thought I'd see that pen again. Or you." He handed it to her, his fingers brushing hers briefly. She turned it over in her hand like a precious stone, then held it against her chest. They moved to the porch swing. It gave a small groan as they sat, the chains above creaking gently. Across the street, the neighbor's silhouette lingered at their window, just visible through the lace curtain. Elvis leaned back, his scarf shifting in the breeze. "How've you been, Miss Clara?" She smiled faintly. "Gardens still blooming, still bake on Sundays, still grading essays for the neighborhood kids when they ask." He nodded, remembering the way she'd hover over desks, tapping a pencil when a student was off track. "Still the same," he said, a touch of admiration in his tone. She chuckled. "And you? Well, you've done all right for yourself." They both laughed quietly at that understatement. Then Clara's expression softened. "You know," she said, "I still have your very first essay, the one you wrote for my class." Elvis's head tilted. "You don't?" "I do," she replied, her eyes lighting. Title was My Dreams. Creased coffee stain in the corner. "You were all of 15. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'd love to see that again." The cicadas' song seemed to quiet just a little as she rose from the swing. The boards under her feet creaked in a familiar rhythm as she crossed the porch. "Wait here," she said, disappearing inside through the screen door. It slapped shut with a gentle thud behind her. Elvis sat still, eyes on the door, listening to the faint shuffle of drawers opening inside. The porch light hummed above him. From the street, a small cluster of neighbors was beginning to gather in the shadows, drawn by the sight of the Cadillac. He reached up, rubbing the back of his neck, then glanced toward the yard where the magnolia tree swayed. His mind seemed somewhere far away, maybe back in that 10th grade classroom. Through the screen, the faint sound of a box lid opening, then her voice. "Found it." Footsteps approached. Elvis's eyes fixed on the door as it began to swing open. The screen door eased open. Miss Clara stepped out, holding a worn shoebox to her chest. She set it carefully on the porch table, the cardboard edges soft and fraying. When she lifted the lid, the faint scent of old paper drifted out, a mix of dust and something faintly sweet, like dried flowers pressed in a book. She reached inside and pulled out a single folded page. "Here it is," she said, her voice warm but trembling. The paper was yellowed, creased 3 times, a coffee stain darkening one corner. Across the top, in blue ink, were the words "My Dreams," in a teenage hand that was determined, but a little uneven. Elvis took it gently, his thumb brushing over his own handwriting. He chuckled under his breath at a misspelled word near the top. "Didn't have spell check back then," he murmured. He read in silence for a moment, his eyes moving slowly down the page. The porch swing creaked softly in the still night air. Then, without warning, he set the paper down on the table and walked to the edge of the porch. Neighbors across the street now stood on their lawns, not saying a word. The crickets carried on, a steady background hum. Elvis turned back to Clara, his voice quieter now. "I'd like to give you something in return." He cleared his throat and began to hum the opening notes of Love Me Tender. The melody floated into the night air, warm and rich, instantly recognizable. His voice rose, not the stage voice that filled arenas, but a softer, more personal tone. It wrapped around the porch, around Clara, like he was singing only to her. You could hear the faint rasp at the edges of his notes, the kind that only came when he meant every word. Down on the sidewalk, a young boy clutched his mother's hand. A man removed his cap. The song was pulling the whole street into its quiet gravity. Imagine your favorite singer standing in your yard, singing like the world had stopped turning. That's what this was. Clara's eyes glistened. She didn't move, afraid that any shift might break the spell. Her hands rested in her lap, one still holding that old pen. When he reached the final line, he let the last note linger in the humid air before fading. For a moment, nothing moved. Not the neighbors, not Clara, not even the breeze. Then Elvis stepped toward her, taking her hand in both of his. "There's one more thing I've been meaning to do," he said. He held her gaze for a moment, then glanced toward the Cadillac. The bodyguard nodded and reached into the back seat. Whatever was coming next wasn't just another song. From the Cadillac, the bodyguard stepped forward, carrying a large black guitar case. Its silver latches glinted under the porch light. The case gave off the faint scent of leather and polished wood. As he set it gently beside Elvis crouched, flicking the latches open with a soft metallic click. The lid rose to reveal a sunburst Gibson, its surface gleaming like it had been waiting for this moment. Inside the plush lining, a folded note rested against the neck of the guitar. Elvis lifted it, smoothing the paper between his hands. "You'll always have a seat in the front row," he read aloud, then glanced up at Clara with a small smile. "EP." Clara shook her head, stunned. "I can't take this." "Yes, you can," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You believed in me before anyone did. This is long overdue." The street had grown completely still. Even the cicadas seemed to have lowered their chorus. Neighbors stood with arms crossed, some smiling, some just staring in disbelief. Elvis lifted the guitar from the case and placed it carefully in Clara's arms. Her fingers curled instinctively around the neck. The wood felt cool and smooth under her. She traced the strings lightly, the faint metallic smell of them mixing with the summer air. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He nodded once, like that was all he needed to hear. Then, without a word, he stepped forward and pulled her into a hug. It wasn't a quick embrace. It lingered, his hand resting on her back, hers gripping the silk scarf at his shoulder. From the sidewalk, the moment looked frozen in time. A music legend, and the teacher who'd once handed him a pen, locked in gratitude. Neither could put into words. When they finally stepped apart, Elvis's eyes were warm but heavy, as if he knew he wouldn't be able to do this again. He walked down the steps, the wood creaking under his boots. The bodyguard closed the guitar case and returned it to the car, leaving Clara with the gift in her arms. The Cadillac's engine rumbled to life. Red taillights glowed against the darkness as Elvis gave her a small wave from the passenger seat. The car rolled slowly down the block, turning the corner, until only the hum of the engine remained. Clara stood alone on the porch, holding the guitar as if it might vanish if she let go. She didn't know it yet, but a week later, an envelope would arrive in her mailbox. Inside, 2 front-row tickets to any Elvis show, anywhere, anytime, for her and her sister for life. She held that envelope in her hands, smiling through tears, already knowing exactly who she'd take with her. The sunburst Gibson never left her living room. It sat in a place of honor by the fireplace, the polished wood catching afternoon light through lace curtains. Some days the faint scent of lemon oil still rose from its strings, where she'd wipe it down with a soft cloth. Her family says every visitor heard the story. How Elvis knocked on her door, sang to her under the magnolia tree, and handed her the guitar. She'd tell it the same way each time, her voice catching when she got to the part about the song. It wasn't the gift, she'd say, resting her hand on the guitar's neck. It's that he remembered. For Clara, the night wasn't about fame or the spotlight. It was about the quiet proof that small acts matter. A pen lent decades earlier. A kind word to a shy boy in the back row. On the mantel beside the guitar sat a framed photo. Elvis and Clara on the porch. Her smile unguarded. His arm around her shoulders. In front of it, carefully propped up, was the handwritten note from the guitar case. You'll always have a seat in the front row. The paper had begun to curl slightly at the edges over the years. The ink was still bold. Every loop of his handwriting as clear as the day he'd written it. Clara passed away many years later, but the guitar stayed in the family, and every now and then, at a holiday or reunion, someone would strum its strings, and the room would quiet, because in that moment, it felt like the porch, the summer air, and Elvis's voice had come back. Sometimes the smallest knock on the door can be the loudest thing in a lifetime. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes a single act of kindness can echo for decades, and tell me, if you could thank one teacher from your past, who would it be?